To continue your conversations, if you could take them outside. This room echoes quite a bit. And this is the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I'm Councilmember Weezer. We've been joined by Councilmember Englander and Cedillo. And if we could go through the consent items, plural. We'll receive and file the director's report. Our general manager is on jury duty. Items number 1, receive and file on consent. We do have cards. Oh, good. All right. It's quite a bit there. All right, so we'll skip on one. We'll keep one on the agenda. They are property of rep owner. Support monument nomination, so they're against the recommendation by the commission. So, all right, some of them. So one we'll hear. Item number 2, we will approve on consent. Item number 3, approve on consent. Item number 4, we will approve a request for continuance to December 2nd. 2014. No objection. Item number 9, approve on consent. And item number 11, we have a card. Okay. So keep 11 on the agenda. So with no objection, receive and file number 12, consent number 2, consent number 3, continue number 4 till December 2nd, and consent number 9. Okay, we're going to take item number 8 first.
Sure.
We could have that read into the record, please.
Sure. Item 8, Councilman, is an appeal by MLK Marlton, and also a second appeal by Armin Ross, and this is relative to the proposed construction of an outpatient medical facility at Kaiser facility in CD10.
Is staff here on that? Aye.
Hello.
Sure. Mr. One moment, please.
I know this is a very serious matter, and we're all prepared for this, but I just wanted to take one brief second to welcome 2 special guests to the meeting today. They're here to advocate on another matter, but Hannah Cedillo and Ruby Cedillo, they're in the back. My 2 granddaughters, they're just beginning their advocacy, and so they were the stars of the Day of the Dead and Halloween last week, so I just wanted to welcome them to the hearing. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Mr. Cedillo.
Can I reserve the right to call them up for testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
Ruby's ready.
Any issue. So back to number 8. We could have staff present this item, please. Welcome.
Hello. I'm Michelle Singh with the Department of City Planning. Before you today is a case that went before the South Los Angeles Area Planning Commission and has been appealed by 2 separate appellants. The project consists of a 4-story, 105,000 square foot medical office building on an 8.6-acre site. It's located on a site commonly referred to as Marlton Square along Santa Rosalia Drive, bounded by Marlton Avenue and Buckingham Road, and it's just south of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. The project is in the West Adams, Baldwin Hills, Leimert Community Plan and the Crenshaw Corridor Specific Plan. On August 19, 2014, the South Los Angeles Area Planning Commission approved a site plan review, specific plan exception, project permit compliance, and disapproved a specific plan exception to permit a 6-foot tall fence in lieu of the otherwise permitted 4-foot fence. Subsequent to the APC determination, 2 appeals were filed. And the first appeal focuses on the disapproval of the specific plan exception to permit that 6-foot-tall fence in lieu of the otherwise permitted 4-foot fence. And the second appeal seeks to overturn the entire decision of the APC and challenges the environmental document. Planning recommends that the council uphold the APC's determination.
Thank you very much. We have appellant number 1, Fred Leeds, and Jeffrey Gold. You have you have a combined 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're here on the Marlton project that Kaiser is proposing that is based on the assumption that there is sufficient parking. There has been a declaration of restrictions that has been enforced in this area for the last 50 years, and the city knows about it. This has been a subject of litigation. There have been repeated actions by the predecessor of Kaiser acknowledging the effectiveness of the declaration. The entire plan is based on the assumption that Kaiser will be able to exclusively use the 8-acre parking area, about 60% of it for itself. And that is not what the Declaration of Restrictions allow. It is not what is for the benefit of the community in the area. The city itself has an obligation to develop commercially those lots that are in the area around MLK on Martin Luther King. The city has that obligation because it took money in order to do a development plan some years ago. And there are records where the city has consistently recognized the parking restrictions, and we submitted this. We have only obtained this information recently because there is a lawsuit now pending where the person who sold, namely the entity who sold the land to Kaiser, asserts that the declaration remains in effect and has sued the city for inverse condemnation and declaratory relief. Now, Kaiser's position to all this is a new position. It's a novel position that no one has asserted in 30 years when there's been all these governmental considerations of how to do the development on the project and how to get the project unified for commercial development. Kaiser's theory is that there was, in 1983, a passage of a statute that somehow by 1987 abrogated the declaration. Nonetheless, from 1997 onward, from 1987 onward, there's 34 lawsuits involving the predecessor of Kaiser on this area enforcing the restriction. There is the city acknowledging the restriction. There's the person who sold the land to Kaiser acknowledging the restriction. The restriction exists. Kaiser knew about it when they purchased it. They got a lower price when they purchased it. And what they're doing is they're prejudicing the community. We are going to have this area undeveloped in the parking area surrounding this because Kaiser is putting a big fence in. It's going to look like a fortress where there will not be able to be commercial development because Kaiser has taken this shared parking area and it's exclusively making its own. Another point that Kaiser does not bring out, and it's just not the way to deal with the issue up front, is that when Kaiser purchased the land from MRP, I call that Marlton Recovery Partners. They purchased the land in 2012. Marlton Recovery Partners, by the way, is the one that's in the city action saying that the declaration remains in effect, and they continue to contend that the declaration remains in effect. But when Kaiser purchased this land, what they did is they got an easement. And when they display what the parking area and access points are going to look like, they have this wonderful tree-lined corridor with an exclusive area, an exclusive access route out onto Martin Luther King. They don't have the right to that. They have a non-exclusive easement. they represent it in their application as if they have an exclusive easement. They do not have exclusive rights to the parking. It's as if someone has come here and applied and said, I'm trying to build a mini mall, and I have parking reserved exclusively for my use, and they don't have the parking exclusively reserved. This is going to hurt the city. It's going to hurt property owners. The last point I want to make is, and then I'll yield to Mr. Leeds for the small remainder of my time. The only argument Kaiser harps on is this statute that came into effect in 1983. Kaiser's owned this land now for 2.5 years. They haven't brought an action to have declared that they have the right to this area. They have not done anything to challenge it. They're just relying on a speculative argument that may or may not float, but we certainly have a fair argument that this declaration remains in effect. And the reason why we have the stronger argument is because that's what the declaration currently says. If they want to speculate, if they want to submit an attorney's opinion that they're going to win in the lawsuit or they can do whatever they like, that is speculative. What's enforced currently is the declaration. It has not been rescinded, and it must be respected for the benefit of the community. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to have commercial development. We just want the city to consider the effects of the lack of parking on the community. And if the Kaiser plan, we support the plan generally. It's a great idea to do development in the city, but it shouldn't squander the area. It shouldn't squander the opportunity to do the redevelopment in the entire area, and that's what exclusive parking in the shared parking area will do.
Greetings. I own 2 of the 4 lots of the 22 acres. Kaiser picked up 8 acres. The original Santa Barbara Crenshaw Parking Company, there's a stock certificate here. It exists. It's always existed since 1950. You can't just take my land with a negative mitigated declaration. They're taking my property. It's not reasonable. It's not fair. I know Dire Straits sang a song, Money for Nothing and Chicks for Free. That was 1950. I own shares in the parking association. Kaiser can't put up a fence and take my land.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was 1980s, wasn't it? 1980s.
The parking association was 1950.
Okay, thank you.
Now the land has value. Thank you.
Armin Ross. It's a second appellant.
Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Armin Ross, and I'm the president of the Crenshaw Chamber of Commerce. And I appealed that portion of the determination that dealt with the 6-foot fence. I believe that the 6-foot fence should be allowed according to the original plan put forth by Kaiser. This area that's been developed has been blighted for more than 20 plus years. There has been an overwhelming effort to get development in that particular area. Kaiser has stepped forward, as nobody has in the past 20 years, to bring a development and medical center to the Crenshaw community. We've been begging for a development like this for the past 20 years. They have stepped forward. We should not allow a strict interpretation of the specific plan, which asks for a 2-foot 6-inch fence, to deter a major development for the area. It will be an economic benefit for the adjacent shopping center, which, by the way, has a 6-foot fence. It will provide medical care for the senior citizens complex that is right next door to it, that, by the way, has a 6-foot fence. And the church across the street and several other properties have a 6-foot fence. They have six-foot fences at other Kaiser properties. There's one on Manchester and Western. It's a beautiful 6-foot fence around it. Some will argue that this facility should be for the community, and absolutely it is. But at the end of the day, it is for Kaiser members. And I would like, as a Kaiser member for the past 30 years, to go to a nice facility, one that looks as good on day one as it will look 10 years from now. Too many times we have allowed strict interpretation of the codes to deter development in our community. We had an opportunity to have a major market several years ago, but strict interpretation of the code. We don't have a market. There's a vacant lot there right now. It should not happen in this case, and I ask for your approval in granting my appeal.
Thank you, sir. And was this condition that you're appealing, was that added in the commission, or was that added by the zoning administrator? You know?
It was a part of the specific plan, to my understanding.
Okay.
And
the
then
specific
they asked
plan.
for an
Okay.
exception to the specific plan to allow.
You're asking for an exception. Yeah,
Yes.
It's not that the commission put that condition in. Okay.
That's
Thank
correct,
you.
to my knowledge. Okay.
Yes.
And
Young leader.
for the record, 1970 Big Yellow Taxi paved Paradise to put up a parking lot, just so we can counterbalance
Okay.
the last argument.
All right, so we did get a parking lot. Okay.
Thank you very much. That type of day today, right? The applicant, Dr. Howard Fullman, Skylar Deniston, and we also have another, someone else from Kaiser, Paul Rohrer. I don't know if that's separate. You guys going to take the 5 minutes as the applicant?
We'll take roughly maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll cede any remaining time to our counsel to speak to the appellant's claims regarding the real estate, the parking easement.
All right.
Hello, my name is Skylar Deniston, Senior Land Use Manager for Kaiser Permanente. This has been roughly about a 3-year odyssey for us from the conception of this project to where we are today, nearing a final decision on this project. We, from the very beginning, we have engaged this community, the Greater Crenshaw Corridor community, on this project. We'll let them know what was programmed, what was needed for our members, roughly 105,000 square foot outpatient medical office building and ancillary outpatient services. But from there, we really opened up the dialogue. What would you like in your community? And what we heard is that time and time again, we need open space. We need amenities where we can meet. So we've incorporated a community room into our structure. We included 2.5 acres of open space that includes a plaza, pedestrian paths, and lots of lush landscaping and open space. And we vetted this with our community groups, other open forums in the community. So in order to do this, we did 2 exceptions to the specific plan. One was to allow for parking the front on Santa Rosa Lee. This is our building frontage. This would allow for the 2.5 acre open space that would connect the retail corridor from the Crenshaw Mall to the residential to the east and south. The other exception is the fence. The fence is just a mechanism in order to protect that open space. That's it. That open space will be available during hours of operation, not only to our members and staff, but to the community. We have made this very clear. All we need is during when it's closed that we'll be able to have a very attractively designed fence that is architecturally compatible with the building, just to protect that open space so when we open up in the morning, there's no trash, there's no vandalism, it's ready to go, and we can start seeing our members. And that's really all we're proposing today. That's our project. We've heard time and time again from the community is, when is this thing going to get built? We've been looking at a vacant 20-acre piece of property that it's vacant now, it's unsightly, and what we have is a project that is thoughtfully designed, it is thoroughly vetted, and deserves to be approved.
Good afternoon, council members. Dr. Howard Fullman. I'm the Area Medical Director of Kaiser Permanente West Los Angeles. Very proud to bring this fabulous facility to this particular neighborhood. This particular neighborhood happens to be one of those most medically underserved neighborhoods in all of Los Angeles. We are going to be bringing state-of-the-art transformational medical care and build a facility like none other in our entire organization. Not only will it have great architectural features, as Skylar was just saying, but it's going to have the most transformational and most current and futuristic approaches to care. And we're going to be offering this facility not just to our members, but even to the community, members of the community who are not members of Kaiser Permanente. There's going to be a beautiful lobby with a nursing clinic available to anyone who wants advice on a moment's notice. There's going to be instantaneous access to care. We're going to have the best and most progressive physicians and staff, and over 50 physicians of multiple specialties in this particular facility. And we're going to be bringing in features that are not even available to any other community that Kaiser Permanente currently serves, or anybody else provides for that matter. We just want to make sure, however, that the facility is safe. We want to make sure it's safe for our members, safe for the community itself, and that all of this fabulous care that we're going to be giving is able to be protected so we can give the care day after day, year after year. So we appreciate very much your consideration. We're looking very much forward to giving this great care and opening this facility in this wonderful, deserving community. And we appreciate your consideration for this variance on the fence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Paul Rohrer.
I'm Paul Rohr, Loeb & Loeb, here for Kaiser. Just want to talk for a couple of seconds to say that Kaiser has responded in detail to the property rights claims that are being asserted here today by one of the appellants. The appellant, Mr. Leeds, has filed a suit against the city and against Kaiser over these property rights claims, which is their right, but it doesn't have anything to do with what you're thinking about here today, because if you look at condition 7 of the conditions of approval, it says that Kaiser is going to provide 525 spaces, so that's a condition of approval, and Kaiser must provide it. So unless you have any questions about the property rights claims.
So I wasn't aware of that. I may have missed it when one of the appellants mentioned it. There is a existing lawsuit on the property rights in question here that they brought up?
Yes,
Okay.
the appellant has filed a claim first against the city, and now they've brought Kaiser in, asserting the same property rights claims that they're talking about here.
Which was my, when I first heard that, my inclination was to say, well, it's a legal issue, and wanted to clarify with staff whether they reviewed that or not. But I don't know if discussing that any further from our city attorney would advise otherwise on that one issue. I have some questions of staff on that one issue. I mean, I don't know if with existing litigation, would that, can we or shouldn't we discuss that here? Or,
Well, I don't really think it's relevant. You just have the entitlements before you.
Gotcha.
If you want to do, some brief inquiry, you can. But otherwise, I don't think it's relevant.
okay, thank you. Got you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Council District 10, Jordan Barokram.
Good afternoon. Jordan
Good
Baruchim
afternoon.
with Council President Herb Weston's office. I'm just here to just touch on a few things that haven't been mentioned. Going back to the South LA APC, the LAPD representative that was there actually gave in incorrect crime stats for the area at that time. They had reported zero crime activity within a 30-day period back a few months ago. Later that same hearing, we actually got an update from the senior lead officer saying that there hasn't been a 30-day period where zero crime has occurred, especially on that site. And then also going back when Kaiser first had discussions about developing the site, they were proposing a height that was consistent with the specific plan. It wasn't until they did their outreach with the community and with LAPD that they requested Kaiser to ask for a specific plan exemption to the Crenshaw specific plan to include a 6-foot fence. So I'm just here to ask that you please grant the appeal in regards to the fence to allow the 6-foot high fence.
Thank you. Pardon me. That's the second.
Mr. Armin Ross, yes.
Yes, the Ross one. Ross, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do we require new findings? Should we go in that direction if we are providing a waiver to the specific plan?
Yes.
Are there findings before us?
Not sure.
Council District 10, have you worked with planning department if you were seeking to support that
I'm sorry?
appeal? We may require some findings.
Okay, I believe some findings were submitted today, so we ask that these findings be adopted.
Oh, you have those findings? I haven't seen them.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They're online and on file.
Oh, okay, good.
Were those findings reviewed by the planning department?
They weren't reviewed by the planning department?
Were they? I don't know if they were.
For the record, they're
Okay.
shaking their head yes. Okay, thank you. That's
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Mr. Englander?
Quick comment.
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've found through sitting through these planning committee meetings and being actively engaged in these issues for a long time. Not to speak about the fence or the parking specifically, but the three most consistently divisive land use issues in communities consistently are schools, places of worship, and medical facilities. The three things that actually make a community. I look at hospitals and healthcare and outpatient facilities as a crisis. Our healthcare system, and I know it's not relevant, but I want to make this statement, is on life support. Our emergency rooms run on average of 98% capacity each and every day, oftentimes at 110% capacity. What places like Kaiser and outpatient facilities do is alleviate a lot of that and supply a critical need in the local community, and they do it well. I want to applaud their tenacity in moving this forward and working with the community and specifically the council office and the area neighborhood councils as well. And they do a good job of outreach. Not to speak of the private individual litigation, I'll leave that to the courts and to them. It is a constant battle that we battle each and every day when we're trying to offer these services and partner with local operators to come into communities, because we've closed more medical facilities than we've opened in decades. And so I wanted to thank all those, whether you're for or against some of these issues, for having a seat at the table and trying to work out what I think is a good compromise. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, and certainly I agree with our shortage of beds and medical facilities throughout the county. It's very much needed. But on this item, we'll move to grant the appeal by Armin Ross and deny the appeal by MLK Marlton LLC and approve the project and to adopt the findings as presented today. Second by Mr. Cedillo and I by Mr. Englander, so ordered. Thank you. Next issue, we'll go to item number 11. If we could move that item on consent, the public speaking card has been removed, retracted.
Item 11, Councilman, it's a motion by Mr. Bonin and Fuentes for yourself, and seconded by yourself and Mr. O'Farrell. It's asking planning and DOT to begin the process of basically responding to amendments to CEQA that were generated by SB 743.
Thank you. So we'll move that item with no objection. Item number 1.
Item 1, Councilman, is a report from the Cultural Heritage Commission. They're recommending denial of the inclusion of the Bartlett residence in CD4 as a historic cultural monument.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, council members. Good afternoon. Ken Bernstein with the Department of City Planning and Office of Historic Resources. What is before you is the Historic Cultural Monument application for the Bartlett residence, 1829 North Kenmore Avenue. The Cultural Heritage Commission recommendation is that the council not declare the property as a historic cultural monument. The commission's recommendation was made on October 2nd on a unanimous vote, 4-0. The committee may recall that this item was before you previously in August to consider initiation of the council motion initiating this historic cultural monument application. The motion was introduced originally by Councilmember Labange, and the committee had a considerable discussion of the item in plum at initiation. When the commission considered the item, there were two potential criteria for designation. One, as to whether the home exhibited the distinguishing characteristics of the colonial revival style. The commission felt that while there are some architectural features of the colonial revival style, this particular property did not rise to becoming an excellent or representative architectural specimen of colonial revival style architecture. Secondly, the argument had been made that this was a notable work of the master architect A.C. Martin. while unquestionably A.C. Martin is a master architect in the history of Los Angeles and its architecture, the Commission's findings were that this did not represent a notable work within Martin's body of work. This was not a house that had been noted in his in surveys of Martin's architectural career, nor did it represent a work that built upon concepts used in other architectural works of Martin. The Commission and the Council previously had designated another Martin residence, the C.C. Ganal House, Historic Cultural Monument number 1012 in 2012, and in contrast to the Bartlett residence, the Ganal House had detailed crown moldings, batchelder tile fireplace, carved oak cabinetry, and a number of other significant architectural features not found in the more modest interior of this residence. So again, the Cultural Heritage Commission recommendation is that the Council not declare the Bartlett residence as a historic cultural monument.
Thank you. Representative Owner, Ben Resnick, and Ellen Murdoch. Do you want to? Is there an appeal on this? Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. No, it's just coming back, but yeah, there's people who are a number of speakers. Oh, there's a historic applicant. So let me go to that first. Yeah, I was looking for the applicant, Bill Zaid. I don't have a card for Charlie Fisher.
I can have a statement.
You are the applicant on record?
Correct.
Okay. Well, you have 5 minutes, sir, and there's no card for...
Well, I would like to hold on that because Charlie Fisher was supposed to be here. He can do the historical breakdown. I can make a statement, but I'd like to reserve the remainder of that time if I could.
Oh, sure, you could do that.
Okay. I appreciate that. All right. Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Bill Zaid. I am the applicant. I also happen to be the chair of the Hollywood Studio District Neighborhood Council. I am not here in that capacity, and a member of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council. The house before you is one of only 3 houses known to be designed by A.C. Martin still in existence. One of them, as mentioned, is already a landmark. Of the remaining 2, this is an unusual house and one of the only things in this neighborhood that has this great significance. So it has more than just significance for LA, but particularly for this part of Los Feliz. This building was designed by Martin, who designed the very building we are currently in. And architects are defined not just by their later works, but by all their works and the breadth of their career. To learn that Martin designed the building took 1 minute, literally, to get permits and see his name on the original 1914 permit. The developer claims that they didn't know originally. That is odd because it took 1 minute. Then they said, well, they had done proper disclosure and they revealed what they knew. It is still odd that it took 1 minute to find A.C. Martin was involved with this. The developer claims they went through the necessary processes, and I respect that. The issue, however, is that a mutual friend of the developer and myself did call me early in this process and say that it was important that this get built, and that he would do everything in his process, including use his connections to the highest office in this city, and to scuttle this. So we find ourselves here after a commission appointed by that office has decided it's not historical, and despite evidence to the contrary. So the real question here is whether political influence and connections decide which buildings are preserved and which are destroyed. I would ask that you avoid political expediency and make the decision to preserve this, and we can come to a mutual solution that will serve both the developer and the preservation of this LA landmark. Thank you, and I reserve the rest of the time. Thank you.
we've never done this, so if you could keep track of what his rest of his time is, well. Ben Resnick. Are you going to take the full 5 minutes, or should we also call Alan Murdoch? No.
Yeah, we could split it between us, but I don't think we need it.
Whatever you guys want. Or, if you understand the rules, you could take 5 minutes and he takes 1, but you get 6 that way. You know, that's...
No, I don't think the case is that. I don't think it's that complicated. I appreciate the time. Ben Resnick with Jeffrey Mangels, Butler and Mitchell, here on behalf of the property owner. The issue really is not what the gentleman who just spoke was saying, trying to imply some political influence and what have you. The issue is, over a year ago, when my client was going through the process with the neighborhood council, going through the various entitlement processes, why wasn't it talked about then? See, what you have before you is not only a completely entitled project, subdivision approvals, this went through subdivision hearings, complete set of building plans done and building permits issued. And then comes the nomination. So the real issue is, why is there a nomination coming in after building permits are issued when this has been a public process throughout this whole time? I think what Councilman Labange attempted to do, as I said in my letter, was to make sure that something wasn't missed, that in fact the experts in the city would in fact take a close look at this. While we disagreed with that process, the fact is it took place, it happened, you, the council, voted for it, and in fact it went through that process. The Cultural Heritage Commission, after the staff at the Office of Historical Resources also recommended denial, the Cultural Heritage Commission also unanimously recommended denial for a whole variety of reasons which I won't go into as to why it's not worthy of recommendation. So what you have before you now coming back is the fact that the city's experts, the city's commission, all took a very close look at this and disagreed and said, no, this is not worthy of designation. And so all we're asking now is that the city council close the loop on this, accept your experts' opinions, and allow my client to go forward and build this, which is ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Murdoch, you going to speak, or is that? No? Okay. Thank you. David Bell?
Good afternoon. My name is David Bell. I'm a former president of the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council. I'm a member of the East Hollywood Planning Committee, and I'm a property owner in East Hollywood, and I recently bought a house in this neighborhood, Los Feliz. And, you know, what we're really asking for is a little bit more time. If a house designed by A.C. Martin doesn't qualify as historical, well, then what really does? You know, people come here from Bel Air or wherever they come from, and they come to my neighborhood. I spent $1 million on my house. These things are community assets that belong to the community. The historic nature of our community belongs to everybody. Why is my investment, why doesn't that count at all? In that I get a minute to talk about a house designed by the architect that designed this building. And what we're saying is, take a close look at it. Don't just tear the thing down and toss it on the land heap, you know, the landfill. Take a look at it and see if there's something else that can be done to save this asset for our community.
Thank you. Doug Haynes, Ziggy Cruz after Cruz.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Doug Haynes. I'm with the East Hollywood Neighborhood Council. And I just want to point out a couple things. Ken said that I'm also a former member of the board of Hollywood Heritage. Ken stated that this isn't a notable work of A.C. Martin. It's the best thing he ever did in my neighborhood. And as David Bell stated, if this doesn't rise to the level of preservation, then nothing does in my community. It's basically a statement that our community is gone and there's no reason to preserve anything. I also want to point out, in all due deference to Mr. Resnick, that CEQA isn't a game of hide and seek. And it was established that the applicant and their consultant basically put false statements into the record under penalty of perjury that there was nothing of significance on that site. That's why the neighborhood didn't know anything about this project or anything about AC Martin. So please keep that in consideration. And I also want to thank Tom LaBonge and Renee. They really stuck their necks out. And unfortunately, in this process in this city, when you stick your neck out for the community against moneyed interests, you usually get it chopped off, but I appreciate what they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Ziggy Kraus, Patty Nicholas.
It's Ziggy Cruz, but that's okay. Good afternoon, council members. I'm here on behalf of HELP, that's Hollywoodians Encouraging Logical Planning and Citizens Coalition Los Angeles. The notice that went out today, we believe was incorrect. It was a Brown Act issue. You guys are referring to a sequence in it that refers to closed session under certain things, but you don't give any explanation whatsoever under Government Code 54954.5 why a possible closed session would be in order. When you guys started the meeting earlier, it was already item 1 for consent, so you already have made up your mind. I don't know if the closed session happened. We don't know. I don't know if you guys talked amongst themselves or yourself about this. However, at this point, I would respectfully request that a proper agenda be posted with open meeting or closed session with the correct wording on it so that the public that is not familiar with the Brown Act has a general idea what you're talking about. So, and I'm also in favor of nominating the House as a monument. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our city attorney, was this properly noticed? City attorney? City attorney? Was there any issue with properly noticing this?
I don't believe so. And in fact, if we're not going to go into closed session, it's a moot issue anyway.
Yes, Mr. Englander.
If I could, Mr. Chair and Mr. City Attorney, just for clarification, it was there was no discussion, certainly on my part, with anybody, but to answer that question, the notification for Brown Act is only the possibility that we could go into closed session is under the idea that there could possibly be a threat of litigation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so it was noticed as such, so we have the ability to go into closed session to discuss this with our city attorneys if we found the need.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Patty Nicholas, and then Richard Petty or Betty?
Mr. Chair, if I may say, this designation or the discussion of this consideration of this application was properly noticed in that the applicant as well as the property owner and whoever signed up to receive notifications on the commission level received notice of this meeting through the mail.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You can move the microphone down.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Patty Nicholas. I'm a resident of Los Feliz of that neighborhood. And I just want to say I'm very sorry about the recommendations because it is, a part of our neighborhood that will enhance the neighborhood. We don't you don't throw away a Picasso sketch because it wasn't one of his more valued works. Any great artist, every single piece that they create is considered a treasure. And that's the way it is. So I don't understand why this house, which is not a blight to a neighborhood, it's an asset to the neighborhood, why we would have to give this up and why we would have to have less value in our neighborhood than more. And it's just for those of us who live it, it was stated when the Channel 7 News came and covered it, they said, if this house is torn down, it will be a tragedy. And I feel that way, and so do our neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard?
I'm Oswald Bartlett's great-grandson. In 1907, Oswald Bartlett was running the Hamburger Department Store, which is one of another historical monument. It was also A.C. Martin's first commission. That's why this house is one of 3 that A.C. Martin ever built. And with respect to the neighborhood, I think that we should also preserve monuments not only to the elite, but also to those who, by dint of hard work and enthusiasm, are able to build something special. Moreover, in this neighborhood, there was once Louis B. Meyer's house across the street. It's been lost. So much has been lost. Why, too, should this be lost?
Thank you. Abraham Sogomonian, and then Sonia Sogomonian.
Hi, so 3 points. One, I'd like to make an objection to the serial meetings by the Cultural Heritage Commission in violation of the Brown Act. Second, we are here today because the developer perjured himself on the CEQA application. Everything that was granted to him, everything was approved, was actually based on the misrepresentation. When the neighborhood councils all found out that they were misled and deceived by seeing the original permit, they pulled back. The third point I'd like to make is please don't reward the developer for lying on the CEQA. The last point I'd like to make is I personally see that there's a collusion between the mayor, Ken Bernstein, and the developer. The mayor and the developer have a mutual friend. I think it's moral and ethically wrong that Ken Bernstein, knowingly, full well that Survey LA has not reached south of Franklin, issues a green light as the cover, in my opinion, for the fraud. When they get caught with the original 1914, Ken again comes to the rescue with a document saying that's not his best work, as if there was more than one to choose from. So I think it's ethically and morally wrong that the mayor appointee, the mutual friend, the mayor, Ken Bernstein, and the developer collude. Please help save this house.
Thank you very much. Sonia Sogomonian, or Sona. And then Rosemary De Monte. Welcome.
Excuse me for my, I will not be able to talk like them.
Okay, but you could talk into the microphone. Yes, there you go.
I'm a neighbor, and the house that we're talking about is right across from me. And I saw one next to me tore down, and it built a huge building, and I really don't want to see the same thing happen, and especially when it's A.C. Martin, the architect of that house. He had 3 houses built. One of them already is heritage. So please, I'm begging, don't let this happen. We would like to save the beautiful house that is on that street, and that's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rosemary De Monte, and then Renee Weitzer from Council District 4.
Hello, I'm here before you because of the disingenuous developer who put something on over all of us, because I am of the Los Feliz Neighborhood Council, and we were not ever told about the A.C. Martin status of this house, or we would have fought it. You have a community impact statement saying we are supporting the designation. I understand my voice is falling on deaf ears because you guys are always afraid of a lawsuit from the developer, but you don't seem to care about the citizens who put lawsuits in. You still go ahead and do what you want to do. I feel you should try to do the right thing here. The developer will not lose any money. The house could be sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars profit. His plans are the stock plans of 6 boxes, 3 stories high with roof gardens that can be put on any lot in this city. And you're going to destroy a unique neighborhood that has beautiful homes still on it. This thing will be the death knell to all those houses, and we'll just have all these boxes to look at in the future.
Thank you. Renee Weitzer, Council District 4. There's no Charlie in the audience, so those 2 minutes are going to expire.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Renee Weitzer for Councilman Tom LaBonge. Councilman LaBonge introduced a motion for this house to be considered. We wanted to give the home an opportunity to be reviewed by the Cultural Heritage Commission Board and save it from demolition until that board had examined the house and had made a decision. We stand by the decision of the Cultural Heritage Commission as they are the professionals of the city. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions or comments? The Cultural Heritage Commission report is recommending denial of the historic cultural monument status for the Bartlett residents. We will receive and file this, adopt the Cultural Heritage Commission report. I just want to make sure.
Because I guess because I can. No.
'Cause you can.
So I wanted to correct some of, if I could, the historical perspective of some of the statements that were made. And I don't think they were done intentionally. I think it was just a matter of perspective and perhaps people's own history of what occurred. Some of the statements that were made were, number one, that the council member in this particular case, Councilmember Tom LaBonge, wasn't listening to the community. It couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, that was just the opposite of what exactly occurred here. When they found the historical designation and the signature of A.C. Martin, that was when the council member, Tom LaBonge, submitted and put this project on hold after TRAPMAT had already been, with conditions of demolition, had already been approved, put it on hold for further determination by experts. The developer in this case acquired a property that had, and if I recall from the record, numerous changes over the years, where architecturally it had already changed. Those documents and pictures to the effect were submitted to this body, and we reviewed them at the previous meeting. With that as well, I believe the Cultural Historical Committee and Commission went through that, and Ken Bernstein and his expertise, and along with his staff, extensively to make those determinations, and they do so very, very carefully, extremely carefully. And so I applaud their work on behalf of the city as well. So I think there's let me take it one step further. If I recall from the last meeting, the testimony was the applicant in this particular case also had contacted, prior to doing anything, contacted the Office of Cultural Preservation as well to make any determination if there was protection on this site. And it was determined that there was not at the time. And so I think the record of what happened here is pretty clear. Some of the statements that were made were slightly, I think, distorted by some, or didn't have all the information. I don't think it was from bad intention. I think it was everybody was in the right place. So I just wanted to point out the record and what happened. That's why we asked for a city attorney opinion as well. And I want to thank the city attorney. That was part of my request, coming back and giving a briefing to us on that as well, and clearing up the record on that. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well said. So we will approve the Cultural Heritage Commission report and deny the historical designation, seconded by Ms. Jenglander, and so ordered. Thank you. Next item, please. Items number 5 and 6 together, please.
Okay. Item 6, Councilman, is an appeal by Warren Kessler and Joan Kessler, and they're appealing the board's approval of a haul route to export 2,087 cubic yards at the property at 1540 North Skylark Lane in CD4. In item 6 is also a haul route appeal, and the appeal is filed by Mike Stoller and Corky Stoller, and this is to export 2,528 cubic yards at 9120 West Oriole Way in CD4 as well. 5 and 6. Yes.
Good afternoon, council members. Cora Johnson, Board Secretary for the Building and Safety Commission. The first item was 1540 Skylark Lane. We had a public hearing on October 7th to export 2,087 cubic yards of earth. The board adopted the MND and approved the haul route with the condition that LADBS provide an oversight committee consisting of LADBS inspectors to monitor the hauling activity in the area on a daily basis. Some of the main issues that were discussed at the hearing were the narrow streets and the amount of the hauling activity in that particular area. Moving on to 9120 West Oriole Way, it was also heard on October 7th, 2014. That was to export 2528 cubic yards of earth. The board adopted the MND and approved the haul route with the same added condition that LADBS provide an oversight committee consisting of LADBS inspectors to monitor the hauling activity in the area on a daily basis.
Thank you for that. The appellants on item number 5, Joan Kessler, Warren Kessler, and Christina Badorate.
I'm going to speak on behalf of our clients.
Okay, thank you.
Christina Badorite, on behalf of Skip and Joan Kessler, of Luna and Glushan. As you are now aware, since the filing of this appeal, it has been revealed by staff that there are 17 pending and/or approved haul routes in this neighborhood, which we are calling the Bird Streets, in the Hollywood Hills portion of CD4. As you are further aware, the proposed mitigated negative declaration fails to consider the cumulative impacts of these 17 haul routes. For this reason alone, the MND is resoundingly inadequate. Pursuant to CEQA, a public agency must consider past, present, and probable future projects that can produce cumulative impacts. These impacts, even if individually minor, can have destructive collective impacts, which CEQA was enacted to avoid. Here, the situation is simple. 17 haul routes, all using the same narrow hillside streets, cannot each be reviewed on a separate basis. This is clear as a matter of common sense and of CEQA law. The cumulative impacts, until analyzed pursuant to CEQA standards, can have the possibility for disastrous consequences. I'd like to address staff's presentation about the mitigation measure that LADBS monitor the different haul routes. There's one major problem with this approach. It does not render the MND adequate. CEQA requires that a public agency interpret the CEQA requirements in a way that affords the fullest possible protection to the environment. It requires review by the proper public departments that have knowledge and expertise as to those particular impacts, and that the MND fully analyze the entirety of those impacts. We can't put a Band-Aid afterwards with the mitigation measures saying we're going to watch these haul routes. That's not proper pursuant to CEQA. I'd like to also point out that no traffic study has been required with any of these haul routes. 17 haul routes in narrow streets in the hillside areas and not one traffic study. How can this be adequate under CEQA? The second issue I'd like to address is that Skylark Lane is a private street. I'm not sure how the city can allow a haul route on private streets. Each of the residences on Skylark Lane, including my clients, own that portion of Skylark, which is immediately in front of them. The problem here is even the bond, which is required by LADBS, doesn't cover that portion of Skylark Lane, which is private. So, in fact, the city is imposing an entitlement on private property owners who have not requested the entitlement without the protection of a bond. I'd like to say that this is akin to almost taking or inverse condemnation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say that Skip, Warren, and Joan would like to say something.
The time is up. 2 minutes? All right, they have 2 minutes combined. Warren, Joan, Kessler, you wish to say something? You guys have 2 minutes left.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Joan Kessler, and my husband and I own the property of 1501 Skylark Lane. First of all, I'd like to say that about 20 years ago, the private street was repaved. It's in terrible condition, and 60 haul routes of over 2,000 cubic yards of earth will destroy that street. Also, the street is quite narrow. At many points, it's about 15 feet. It was represented to be 26 feet. It's so narrow, I don't see how it could even happen that a truck that size could come down it. Also, as far as traffic is concerned, I can barely make it to my office in Century City with all the traffic that's caused by what's going on in the neighborhood right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council members, my name is Warren Kessler. I likewise live at 1501 Skylark Lane and would be significantly impacted by the haul routes that have been approved for a private street. I personally measured the street. The staff member who presented his report said the street is 26 feet wide. However, at various points leading to 1540 Skylark, the street's only 15 and a half feet wide. I measured it myself, and then 20 feet wide. So that if one of our neighbors wants to park his or her car or a guest's car along the street, there will be an impasse if a 10-wheel dump truck tries to come by. As to our council's comments about the CEQA issue and the cumulative effect, I will only tell you what, and quote directly, what the chair of the Building and Safety Commission said when he was considering 3 different applications in the Bird Streets, and he said we're juggling with hand grenades. So you likewise are juggling with hand grenades. He said we are juggling with hand grenades.
Oh, thank you. Jason Summers, Joan Hushan.
Hello, committee members. My name is Jason Summers from Crest Real Estate. My firm represents both 1540 Skylark and 9120 Oriole. The haul route is something that is obviously of much note to the community, and currently, although there are 17 in application, there are only 2 active haul routes currently ongoing in the Bird Streets, both of which are in a separate area by close to a mile from where both the projects that we're talking about right now. Both of those projects were also represented by myself at 9272 Robin and 1822 Marchita. Those are both over 90% completed with their construction process for the hauling. Of the 17 haul routes that are coming online, my firm has been working very closely with the inspectors and the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners liaison, Jason Healy, to show that there's a staggered approach to where these haul routes are actually coming in and when they're going to be under construction. Currently, the haul routes that are in place and approved are all in different stages of construction, and Jason Healy has put into place a new measure with the haul route hearings. It's only going to be allowing haul routes to be heard once they've gone through a approval process through plan check, and pending a ready to issue permit status are going to be able to be heard by the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners. That should alleviate the unknown of when haul routes are going to start occurring in the hills. And because they are in a similar area, however, there's only one haul route pending on Oriole Drive, and there's only one haul route pending on Skylark. So they use same service streets of Doheny primarily, which is a fairly straight run, and then some of the haul routes don't even go down Doheny that are on that list, and they go down the Thrasher Sunset Plaza side. We've also been in a lot of coordination with the inspection offices, and Bob Steinbeck, who is here, who I hope will be able to speak to the process, is understanding that there's not currently a major impact of hauling. As of today, there was probably no hauling trucks in the Bird Streets that were going out. The 9120 Oriole project is probably the next one up and ready for construction, and it would be a shame to have more projects delayed so that they all end up coming in together at the same time. Right now, there is a staggering of projects that are going on in the Bird Streets, and that can be attested to by Jason Healy and the Board of Building, and the Building and Safety Department, and where these things stand with their permits. Another thing that is of major note, our firm has been very much in communication with the council office, and Jonathan Brand knows that we've reached out to people in the community and knows that our firm has really put these measures in place of the mitigating factors, the flagmen, the restricted hauling hours, not doing hauling on Saturdays. These are all conditions that before becoming mandatory with the haul route process as of recent were things that we were doing ahead of time to try and skirt this issue. We recognize the amount of projects and the cumulative impact that they may have in the future. However, currently, the mitigated negative declarations that were published for both of these properties, 9120 Oriole and 1540 Skylark, on August 21st of 2014. The mitigated negative declarations have a 20-day appeal process. Neither mitigated negative declaration was appealed. The appeal that we're in front of you today is to appeal the unanimous approval of the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners for these 2 haul routes. I'm hoping that you'll speak with Bob Steinbach, who is here, and the head of the inspection offices, and to understand the mitigation factors that are being put in place, the amount of dirt hauling that is actually occurring right now, and what we're trying to do in the future to make sure that we're able to mitigate all of these factors to confirm that construction is done safely in the city of Los Angeles, because I drive through those hills as much as anyone, probably more, driving to all of the job sites throughout the day. So it is important to have these things in place, and we feel that at this time the projects have been mitigated with the necessary measures and should be continued forward so that we may commence construction and not have a backlog of projects in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan Hushan.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Joan Hushan. I live at 1532 Skylark Lane, which is the third house down from the proposed project at 1540. It is a very narrow, steep, private drive. There's 9 houses on it. We have no road service up there, so any repairs to the road has to be borne by the residents on the road. So we are concerned about the number of trucks coming up and down. The area that these trucks would have to pass by my property, over my property, to get to 1540 is about 15 and a half feet. And there is no turnaround, so the trucks will go in and have to back out. There's also a bit of a safety hazard there. Past projects that Mr. Rubin has done, he has put containers for debris on my property and has not fixed the road afterwards. And there has been damage to sewer lines that run all the way down from Skylark Lane down to Oriole Drive, underneath the road and down to the other street to get to the city's sewage. So I would support this appeal that this project has another look toward to see if it's reasonable to take out that amount of dirt down Skylark Lane. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council District 4, Jonathan Brand. How are you, Mr. Brand?
Good. Good to see you, council members.
First time you came in here a long time ago, you didn't have that beard on.
Yeah, I just shaved yesterday. It's unbelievable. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jonathan Brand with Councilman Tom LaBonge's office. Now, Mr. Summers, who just spoke with Crest Real Estate, he's the applicant's rep, has a ton of projects going on in the area, and overall he has been indeed very cooperative, including on projects that don't have any haul routes or anything pending. They would have no conditions. He has met with the community, our office, and people's homes and come up with solutions to help address. I mean, we have a ton of construction going on, and the roads are extremely narrow. Also, since the appeal has been filed, Building and Safety has been working diligently to address a lot of these concerns, and I believe Bob Steinbach is here to explain some of what they have been working on and what they've been doing in other parts of the city that have had this critical mass happen before this part of the city. That said, the council office supports the appeal, as the neighbors do indeed have a legitimate concern about the potential cumulative impacts for public safety in regard to the 17 approved and or pending haul routes in this immediate neighborhood. The only way up and down out the Sunset is Sunset Plaza or Doheny, and so indeed we support this appeal because of that, and we hope that they continue to work with the community and work with planning and building and safety to address these concerns, to address that when you have a haul route and there's a bunch of other projects going on, how do you address that safety concern?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we'll go to item number 6. We're taking 5 and 6 together. Gregory Taylor.
Thank you. Council members, my name is Gregory Taylor. I'm here today representing Mike and Corky Stoller, who are immediately adjacent to the project at 9100 Oriole Way. I will not repeat the things that were brought up by the other appellant. However, there are some issues that we feel are really necessary to address. There are basically three prime issues that go on with this neighborhood with respect to construction. The first is residential traffic to and from the 150 to 200 homes within this area, which feed into Doheny and then eventually down onto Sunset. And this is primarily accessible through that one intersection, and all of this construction traffic has to go through that intersection. Parking for residents and their guests, home personnel, parking for the construction site, the workers, city employees or inspectors, all must be taken into consideration. The bird streets are very narrow. This is a very difficult parking area. Initially, they were going to disallow parking on both sides as part of these projects. Now they're saying they're just going to disallow it on one side. But it's very difficult for trucks to maneuver these streets under the best of circumstances. And also, there's a potentially disastrous effect upon emergency vehicle access when this is going full force in effect. You've been to address the number of projects that are coming, and yes, indeed, there are 17 projects that could happen, and there is no timing that is established for all of these projects with respect to how they should be done or what should be going on. The Board of Building and Safety Commissioners at the hearing recognized this impact. However, they felt that the issue had been mitigated to a level of insignificance by a condition that we feel is just totally inadequate. The cumulative impact was addressed basically by a condition that was that an oversight committee consisting of LA Department of Building and Safety Inspection shall monitor the hauling activity in the area of the subject property on a daily basis. There is no specific guidelines for monitoring and controlling the hauling traffic, construction parking, or parking limitations on residents during this period of ultimate disruption to the neighborhood. It seems to be saying on behalf of the city, oh, we'll take care of it, don't worry about it. And the neighborhood certainly is worried about it. There is not sufficient evidence of conditions at this point to protect the neighborhood. We request that all construction projects must not take place simultaneously under any circumstances, since there are no imaginable conditions under which the cumulative impact of these simultaneous projects would not significantly negatively impact the normal quality of life for residents of the neighborhood. One suggestion would be to stagger the schedule of construction projects such that only 3 to 5 happen in the neighborhood simultaneously, and to impose mitigating conditions addressing the cumulative impact of all concurrent projects in addition to the individual projects. At a minimum, of specific schedule reviewing and considering all projects with their timing and hauling quantities should be prepared by the Department of Building and Safety. This should be provided to the residents so that they may review and may make necessary input. The process should be fully transparent so that all affected residents may review and, if necessary, raise additional concerns that may not have been considered by the city in their review. I'd like to point out that my clients, the Stollers, do not oppose the construction of this project or even the amount of grading. It is simply the impact during construction and the potential disaster for the streets in this area that could come from the cumulative impact of all of these projects. While it is true that the publications with the notice for the CEQA and for the neg deck were published for 20 days, as we all know, that publication is in an obscure newspaper, and there's really no notice beyond that. However, those conditions have been adopted by the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners as conditions of their approval to mitigate their action, and therefore they are a part of that report. So an appeal of that particular portion, including the mitigation condition, would be totally appropriate, and I don't believe that that opportunity has passed by simply because the 20-day notification period to object to the entire document was founded. We really hope that this has worked out at this level. They are not seeking to stop the project. We're simply seeking to do everything that's necessary to protect this neighborhood and all of the bird streets and everything that feeds into Doheny and Sunset when this massive amount of construction and grading is taking place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Rob Rawson, Jerry Weiner, Jason Summers. All you guys are the owners. Okay.
And Mr. Summers represents 9120 Oriole Way. I had been added as a speaker today. I'm not sure that's a real honor or delight, but I appreciate your taking the time to hear me. And basically, I have heard what Mr. Summers proposed. I think one of the great advantages of having an expert, and Mr. Summers representing us, is that he's done a good job, a fine job at getting us to this point. We are, as I understand, the only applicant that presently is ready to get building permits and to move forward with construction. So we would be, after 7 or 8 months of waiting for the haul route, we would be the first haul route, or beneficiary of the first haul route of the so-called 17 or 18 other applicants. One of the disadvantages is it seems that everybody is lumping us together. I appreciate the previous speaker's honest and candid and forthright statement that he doesn't oppose the construction of this project. I've owned this property with my partner for over 2 years. We have many millions of dollars in this property. We have complied with all of the requirements, all of the regulatory issues. We've hired the experts that are handling these for us, and we have agreed to all of the conditions that were imposed at the last hearing. So any further delay has a serious impact on our particular project in terms of time and money. And we are ready to start building. I think in the next, Mr. Summers could address that, but I think we're in the final stage of plan check, and we would be ready to engage in the haul route subject to your approval. So I would appreciate your denying the appeal. I guess I'm not familiar with the procedure, but granting our application for the haul route, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Jonathan Brand. Item 6.
Council members, essentially it's the same statement from last time. There.
Okay.
Summarize it. Cumulative impacts are paramount in that we support the appeal to have a deeper look into how you take care of those cumulative impacts to mitigate public safety issues.
Thank you. Staff, are you here on this? Can you come up to the microphone, please? No, I'm calling. Yeah, we called the other. We've already called. We went through that. You had your opportunity there. The staff, can you come up, please? So, how do we account for cumulative impacts on haul routes?
Regarding the MND, the mitigated negative
Yes.
deck, I'd have to refer that to city planning.
Okay, can you come up, please?
Shauna Bonson, City Planning Department. In terms of cumulative impacts in single-family homes, so our basic statement is that mitigated negative declarations provide adequate environmental analysis that identify impacts for each individual project, and each MND fully mitigates based on the requirements imposed. So, for example, we look at erosion, geotechnical, and construction staging. It's the long-standing consistent with the longstanding approach in the department to single-family homes in the hillsides under CEQA. Individual homes, so single-family residences, are not considered to contribute cumulatively to environmental impacts, so we really approach each MND individually. I noticed that some of the concerns noted today have to do with the logistics and then the construction and the timing, so the MNDs wouldn't stipulate that. The timeline for when construction would be appropriate might be more at the time of the permitting. The MNDs don't anticipate the precise timing of the construction and that kind of coordination. We believe the concerns that are addressed in the action of the Board of Building and Safety Commissioners, which kind of speak to the Oversight Committee consisting of Department of Building and Safety Inspection shall monitor the hauling activity in the area of the subject property on a daily basis, that addresses the concerns. In not adopting the MND, of course, this would stop construction of the projects entirely.
Yeah, so how do we account for the simultaneous haul routes that we approve in one particular area?
So in terms of the logistics, that's not something that we look at in the M&D. So each M&D is looking at the individual project, and we're not looking at the cumulative impacts of the trucks. That's what we're proposing is really a building and safety measure, or it's done at the time of permitting. because we may have a number of MNDs that come to us and we're looking at the circumstances of the property itself.
Gotcha.
Not in terms of the timing, because we don't know when the projects are going to actually get constructed.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's talk to building and safety then. And in your review, how do you account for multiple and simultaneous HAL routes? Who? Steinbeck. Well, first let's...
Great. I'm so glad I didn't.
Okay. Steinbeck.
Afternoon. So first off, I am not here as an advocate for the project. My name got thrown around quite a bit. Cumulative impact is a very relative term. It's something that was brought up in council a couple of years ago. It's been batted around as if it's a quantifiable entity, and it is not, especially in the case of haul routes and projects. And the reason it is not is because, as it was said earlier, there's like 17 projects. I actually, in CD4, in a general vicinity, have 57 projects that are going, not necessarily hauling, they're in various stages of construction or pending or whatever. But when you try to look at the cumulative impact, it's difficult because when does one start and the other one end? Can we dictate when somebody starts a project, when somebody ends? There's always financial considerations, or contractors trying to take delivery of materials and they're held up somewhere and they can't get them, so 2 months goes by. I mean, the very nature of construction is not a precise timed project unless you're talking about Wilshire Grand or a huge project where they have a specific timeline. We get into residential, it doesn't work that way. So city planning is spot on right when they talk about, they consider the areas and sizes and density and things like that. But when it comes down to the actual construction, we have to do it in the field. I have to use my staff to monitor this. So at expense to the department, without being recouped by permits or any other fee, which I hope we can talk about at a greater time, a better time, we have a monitor, a haul route monitor, and we started this in CD5, and actually as we speak, he is working overtime in CD4, and he monitors all of the haul routes that are out there, every single one of them, at least every other day. And he doesn't just monitor them to see that they're hauling, he looks to see that these haul route mitigation issues that were imposed by the MND and by the Building and Safety Commission are being adhered to, and more importantly, that they actually work. I'll give you for instance, let's say we have 3 haul routes in the same general vicinity, and each haul route says you can't haul on Saturday and Sunday, can't haul before 9, after 3, you have to stage on site, you can't stage in the street, all the typical type of measures that you see in our haul routes. But they may call for 4 flag persons at 4 major intersections. But you have 3 haul routes with 4 flag persons, so you got 3 people standing there with a flag in the same intersection. That's ridiculous. So what we do with our monitoring program is we go in and we do pre-hauling meetings and pre-construction meetings. We bring the hauling contractors together and say, look, we know what the conditions say. We can amend them in the field. Move your flag persons. We're still going to have 12, but now we're going to cover 12 intersections while those 3 haul routes are going on. At such time as one haul route ends, we may adjust them again so that we're covering and making it safe. The Building and Safety Commission goes to great lengths to employ every single mitigation measure that they possibly can. What we've provided the Commission now is, just as an example, I know you can't see it, but there's a lot of dots on this piece of paper. This is every construction project in the vicinity in CD4. I have a list of every single project, all the data information, when it's inspected by our monitor, not the building inspector. This is just the person that drives the streets and makes sure they're doing it right, and the data that and the input from each one of the visits. Also with that, there is a network of phone numbers from all the appropriate agencies, DOT, street services, fire, police, building and safety, anybody that has anything to do with an issue that can come up in the middle of a haul route. We have cellular communications instantaneously with the right people to deal with the issue on the spot. We also reserve the right to shut down a project anytime we think that they're not playing by the rules. and we have done that on many occasions. We can actually send them back to the commission and stop the project, where the commission can then reevaluate, employ more mitigating measures, or modify it in some way. I mean, we have that ability to do that, and we exercise it. I will say, just as a statistic, in CD5, we were getting at least 4 complaints from the public a day directly to our monitor. Those 4 complaints have now gone down to maybe 2 complaints a week. And when they call with a complaint, my monitor goes directly there, witnesses the issue, and takes care of it. Also, the monitor meets with each one of the projects, and we do spontaneous checks. You know, we work from 7 to 3:30. That monitor is there sometimes at 6 in the morning, 6 at night, pops by on Saturdays. Whenever they think we're not going to be there, we happen to show up so that we can say we were there and we witnessed what's going on and we take the appropriate action. It's not the panacea to the issue, but it is the stopgap that we're implementing right now until such time as next week, when all the departments get together to work on satisfying the motion that's supposed to come back to this committee in the next month.
Just a quick question for you. That was incredibly thorough, and I really appreciate it.
Sorry.
And no, it was very good. And now I can tell the kids that are at school with my daughter, if you are a hall monitor, you can actually become
That's right.
a hall route monitor one day.
So
So with that, just one of those days. It's important that the chair laughs. I don't care about all of you. So the cumulative impacts issue that was brought up earlier, if we were to ever try to come up with some regulation, it would, from what you've just shared, and if we were to try to affect CEQA and add something to an MND that took the totality of that cumulative effect into effect, we would essentially cripple all development, period. I mean, I've got a project, for an example, in my district that's been sitting idle for 15 years, and it's now re-emerging suddenly. We had one for 20 years that nobody knew about that had full entitlements and then was built. And they had haul routes, everything was approved many, many, many years ago. So you don't know when something's going to happen. I mean, you were talking about months. I'm talking about years. So if you took into consideration the totality of all the project's cumulative impact, nothing would ever get done, is essentially what you're saying. And so, but what you've done is even better than that. And as you've explained the entire process. Of course, I look forward now for you to come to our other committee in Budget and Finance to give that same discussion and why it's so critical to protect the communities and put more people in place from a public safety perspective, as some of the council offices and others alluded to, that we need more enforcement, but the enforcement we've got is good.
At the cost of the project.
Got it. Thank you.
That was quite a bit you guys do, but so it's how many projects are in this area in terms of the projects that are
I have 57 on my list right now, but of those, I have 14 haul routes that are approved and only 3 that are happening right now.
Okay.
I have a lot of pending. I have 9 pending projects, and the rest of the projects are in various stages of construction and not hauling.
Okay.
And by the way, of the haul routes that are current and the hauling activities that are going on, 2 of them are 90% complete.
2 of them are what?
2 of them are 90% complete hauling.
Yeah.
So in a very short period of time, they're going to be done, and they'll be a non-issue.
Okay.
So the precedent we'd be setting if we did anything in the future, not necessarily now, or if we took into consideration cumulative impacts on hauling, would be horrific. I mean, you couldn't control that then, and better to treat it with enforcement and regulation in the way that we've already got in place through building safety.
I know. The mitigation measures have always been there. But with us not there watching it every minute, which we can't be, as you know, sometimes the haulers, the guys driving the trucks, don't play by the rules because they weren't in the hearing, they don't know.
Sure.
So those issues cause problems. With us
There's
now,
there's phone numbers to report those issues to. You can go down and
Right.
crack down on
They
them.
play by the rules now. It's much better.
Our council, so you don't, so when you're trying to figure out, I think cumulative impacts is a term of art from CEQA, and then, so that's in the environmental section, that's M&Ds, et cetera, so, but the discussions we often have are cumulative impacts on haul routes that are not, well, they're governed just on a different type of criteria, but we use that term to kind of describe whether a number of them are having impacts or what type of impacts. Well, you describe how you monitor it, but we hear, not only this committee, but the Building and Safety Department grants these haul roads all the time. So you have no say in the number of routes that are approved and going on. You just try to manage them as they come. Is that?
That's pretty much all we can do, but it's important to remember that DOT and Street Services get these haul routes first. And they're the ones that make recommendations to us and to our commission on what measures need to be taken on their side. So, we can vary the size of the truck, the frequency of the trucks, how many hauling days, how many truckloads can happen in one day. So if there's too many trucks, we can actually slow it down to where there's fewer trucks on the road at any one time. Although the problem is that extends how long they're going to be hauled.
So Building and Safety determines that at that point, right? I mean, they try to figure out all the different routes that have been approved, and
That's what the commission does.
that's what the commission does.
Yeah, before the commission hears now, the commission staff looks at all of the projects, like for instance the Bird Streets. It's a big topic with us right now, and they look at everything that's happening. In fact, to be honest with you, the commission secretary has actually scheduled them so that they're not all coming at once because they're very contentious. There's a lot going on up there. There's a lot of trucks, so they've slowed down how fast we process those and how fast we calendar them so that we can make sure. The commission staff, by the way, is in constant contact with my haul route monitor.
Dees, do you think there's too many out there right now in this particular area?
Too many approved or too many hauling? Big
Too many
difference.
approved.
No, because you know me, I've been doing this over 30 years. I've been here when it was boom and when it was bust, and I have yet to see where there were too many haul routes going at the same time. An important distinction.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. In my council district on the hillsides in northeast LA, I've seen too many routes and trucks coming in and out for different projects, and it does negatively impact.
If the trucks stage on the street, it's a huge problem. So what we've done over the years, if we've said you cannot stage it, in other words, while the trucks are waiting to be its turn to get loaded, they would line up on the streets. That just doesn't happen in the hills anymore. They have to stage way down off of Sunset or somewhere else. They have to be en route. They're all radio controlled now. So the guy on the site, the hauling contractor on the site, knows how long it's going to take this truck to get loaded and get down. We have them where they can't pass each other. So one truck has to get all the way down before the other one comes back up.
Okay, well, let me recommend this. The council office, who represents this area, who's in constant communication with the local neighbors who live there and see this each and every day, they obviously have concerns. Maybe can we continue this for a week while the council office further discusses some possible mitigations or recommendations?
The last day to act, Councilman, is November the 14th. There's no meeting next week, and Veterans Day.
On Monday or Tuesday? Is it Tuesday or
Veterans Day is Tuesday. And there is no opportunity for an extension on haul routes.
Okay, sounds good. And this will go to council, whatever action we take?
Yes.
And when will it be in council?
Mr. Chair, that would be November 12th on Wednesday, because Tuesday is Veterans Day.
So that's a week and 1 day from now. Okay.
Unless you had a special plum meeting next week.
special what?
Plum meeting.
On
Committee
Veterans
meeting.
Day.
No, the day after.
In a parade, man. Politicians. Huh? We can move this forward, you know, with no recommendation and have the local council office work with the interested parties and recommend for something for us in council. Can we do that?
The action of the committee would be no recommendation.
Is that okay with everyone here? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So ordered, and no recommendation.
For 5 and 6.
5 and 6, we have the local council member advise us in full council. Thank you. All right, next item, what do we have?
Next item is item 7, an appeal, councilman, from Jeffrey Springer and Mary Lou Calderon. They're appealing the action of the Planning Commission relative to a 28-story mixed-use development for condominiums and 3 commercial condominiums in CD 14.
Thank you. Welcome. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Good afternoon, council members. Fernando Tovar for the record with the Office of with Planning Department Expedite Section. So the appeal before you concerns a proposed high-rise mixed-use development located at 1133 South Hope Street in downtown Los Angeles, which received several entitlements. Those entitlements consist of a modification to a previously approved project under vesting tentative track 68095, which was approved back in August of 2007. There is also a related ZA case, that's case ZA 2013-4157, which granted approval of 3 separate entitlements. Those entitlements consisted of site plan review, a floor area deviation of less than 50,000 square feet, and a variance to allow long-term bicycle parking to be dispersed on all levels of the parking garage. Now, I conducted hearings on this project in April of this year and issued my determination letters in July of this year, approving all of the requested entitlements. The entitlements were then appealed and heard by the City Planning Commission on August 14 of this year. The City Planning Commission had jurisdiction over all of the entitlements and denied the appeals and sustained my decisions. Now, to narrow down what is actually before the committee today, the City Planning Commission's action approving a modification to vesting tentative track 68095 was not appealed, and that is not before you today. Also, with respect to the ZA case, pursuant to section 1605H4, site plan review has only 1 level of appeal, and the City Planning Commission's decision is final on that entitlement. Also, pursuant to section 14.5.76E of the Municipal Code, the floor area deviation has only 1 level of appeal, and the City Planning Commission's decision on that entitlement is also final and not before the Plum Committee. So the only entitlement that is before the committee is the variance, which is further appealable to the City Council. In addition to that, the addendum to the previously adopted M&D is also before the Plum Committee. I'm just going to briefly give you an orientation on the site. The project site is an interior lot located within the South Park community, located on the west side of Hope Street between 11th and 12th, approximately mid-block. The site is currently improved with a surface parking lot that contains approximately 28,500 square feet and contains approximately just over 100 surface parking spaces. The site has about 184 feet of frontage on the west side of Hope Street and the same amount of frontage on an alley located to the west. The property is zoned QR5-4DO and is designated for high-density residential uses. There is no height limit on the site. The site is located about 2 blocks just east of Staples Center and LA Live. Now, the scope of the previously approved project, going back to 2007, consisted of a 30-story building with a 5-level podium and a tower. That project contained 159 residential condominium units and 5,029 square feet of ground floor commercial space. The maximum building height was just over 330 feet, and the total floor area of the building consisted of 221,322 square feet, and that included an approximately 50,000 square foot transfer of floor area that was approved by the CRA at that time. Now, the revised project before you is generally similar to the previously approved project. The project is now a 28-story project instead of 30 stories, with a reduced height of approximately 8 feet. It now has a 4-level podium instead of a 5-level podium. The project contains the same amount of ground floor commercial space, and the total overall floor area is the same. However, the residential density was increased from 159 units to 208 units, an increase of 49 units. The units are smaller, which allows a greater number of units to be accommodated within the same floor area. Now, even though the density was increased by 49 units, the building envelope is slightly less than what it previously was. The project is park to code. With respect to the downtown design guidelines, the project's design has been vetted by the Urban Design Studio within the City Planning Department and by the City Planning Commission on Appeal, and has been found to be consistent with the downtown design guidelines. With respect to the bicycle parking variance, the variance is only to allow long-range bicycle parking to be dispersed on all levels of the parking podium and below grade. No reduction in the number of required parking spaces is requested. More important, none of the issues that have been raised on appeal before you today address the findings related to the bicycle variance. With respect to the environmental clearance, an expanded M&D was prepared and circulated and adopted for the previously approved project. That expanded M&D provided a comprehensive environmental analysis of the potential environmental impacts associated with the project. No significant unavoidable impacts were identified by the environmental analysis, and mitigation measures were identified and incorporated as conditions of the project to reduce any potential environmental impacts to a less than significant level. There were no legal challenges mounted to the adopted M&D at that time. Now, the addendum that is before you today addresses changes to the previously approved project, including the additional residential density as well as changes to the circumstances surrounding the project. That means that baseline conditions were updated to accurately address any changes that may have occurred to the physical environment since the preparation and adoption of the original M&D. The analysis in the addendum did not identify any new environmental impacts associated with the modified project, and all of the previously identified mitigation measures that were incorporated to the previously adopted M&D are adequate to serve the current project as revised. With that, committee members, I believe that the applicant submitted a very long and detailed point-by-point response to all of the issues that are raised in appeal, so I'm not going to go into all of the details. I would only say in closing that I believe that the developer in this case has made fair and reasonable concessions and design modifications to make sure that the project is not only consistent with the downtown design guidelines, but to address also the concerns of the appellants of the adjacent Flower Street lofts. In summary, the podium has been lowered. A 10-foot setback is provided along the adjoining alley, even though no setback is required. In addition, a loading bay is being provided along the alley on the project site. This is beyond the 10-foot setback. And that loading bay is going to have a 13 to 18-foot clearance, which will accommodate large vehicles for deliveries, or if persons moving in and out of the building rent any types of trucks or have delivery trucks rented. So again, I think all of those changes to the project assure that there's going to be absolutely no impacts on the alley. Now, vehicular access to the site, DOT would prefer to have all vehicular access located off of the alley. The applicant has actually provided access on both the alley and Hope Street. 70% of the access on Hope Street will provide access to 70% of the parking spaces on the site, whereas the alley will provide less than 30% access to less than 30% of the parking spaces on the site. So that really minimizes the number of vehicles that would be going in and out of the alley as well. Beyond that, with respect to the design of the project, commissioners, the design consists of a 4-level podium, ground floor commercial uses, with 3 levels of parking above. That is consistent with the guidelines. There's no requirement to include any habitable space unless the podium exceeds more than 3 levels above the ground floor. The tower is set back approximately 40 feet from the rear property line from the alley. When you take into consideration the width of the 20-foot alley, that means that it has at least a 60-foot setback from the adjacent Flower Street lofts. The side lot lines, I believe that there's approximately a 33 to 39-foot side yard setback. Beyond that,
So what is you described the project in full detail, modifications that have been made. What's before us actually today that is being appealed?
Correct.
And
So
the remaining items.
correct. So two items are before you. One is the addendum to the previously adopted MND, and the second is the bicycle, the variance to allow bicycle parking to be located or dispersed throughout all levels of the parking garage. Those are the two items.
On that second item, can you tell us what that is? What is the requirement and what is the variance that's being requested?
I can. Yeah. So, as you know, the new bicycle provisions require short-term and long-term bicycle parking to be provided. Long-term bicycle parking, I believe, is based on a ratio of 1 space per unit for the residents or occupants.
These are under the guidelines,
For
right?
the building. This is not the guidelines. This is the bicycle provisions. So this has nothing to do with the guidelines. To get back to the guidelines, the downtown design guidelines, under site plan review, we are required to make a finding that the project is consistent with the downtown design guidelines. Site plan review is not further appealable, so it's not before you. So that's why I mentioned that most of the issues that have been raised are really not relevant to the bicycle parking variance. So the bigger issue that's probably before you is the addendum to the MND.
So if we were to follow the what's required on the bicycle parking, what would be required?
Okay, so long-term bicycle parking is required to be provided inside a parking garage along the shortest walking distance to the nearest pedestrian entrance of the building and on the level of the parking garage that's closest to the ground floor. So the level that's closest to the ground floor in this case would be the at-grade level, since there's parking at grade. That would require display. It just wouldn't be practical because you would displace either the commercial ground floor space. You've got the lobby to the residential component of the project. You've got the driveway and ramps and parking aisles. You've got some residential parking spaces. There is both short-term and long-term bicycle parking provided at grade, but again, if they provided all of the required long-term bicycle parking at grade, you would end up displacing quite a few other more critical uses on the ground floor. There's also trash and recycling areas that need to be at grade so that the trucks can come up to, and haul away the trash and recycling. You really can't locate those types of things on other floors.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. So with that, I would urge the committee to deny the appeal and adopt the addendum. Thank you.
All right. We have the appellants, Mary Lou Calderon and Jed Springer. Don't know. 5-minute total on the appellants. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for your service. Nice to see you again. It's been a while since I've seen one of you. Councilmember Weezar.
Microphone up, please. So we can, yeah, thank you.
As always, it's a pleasure. Let me see. I have a number of, first of all, I'm surprised by Mr. Tovar's comment that the site plan review and the TFAR is not further appealable because his decision and the decision of the Planning Commission stated that they were. So I haven't had an opportunity to review those municipal code sections that Mr. Tovar just cited, and I can't really comment any further other than to say that it appears to be in conflict with the decision itself. With regard to the addendum, and actually I'd like to pull back and say that when you and I spoke at the ULI meeting that was held in South Park, the South Park bid, the ULI report was presented, and there was a discussion about the goals of what would be constructed in the South Park area. And the ULI report was very clear that one of the biggest problems is actually podium parking. Podium parking constrains the pedestrian environment on our streets in South Park. And the buildings that are most disliked includes the Watermark Tower, which has that podium parking, and it's built in a location that makes it very unsuitable for street side uses in the immediate vicinity. This project exacerbates that problem because it fills property line to property line virtually with a 4-story parking podium. And it does a second thing that the ULI report advocated and is one of the goals of the city, which is to make the pedestrian-friendly alleys in this vicinity. There's a couple of very aggressive remarks made about that in the response prepared by the applicant, one of which is to say that the alleyways don't have to be analyzed in the negative declaration at all because it's only an aesthetic problem. Well, I'd like to say that having a good alleyway, pedestrian-friendly alleyway system was advocated by the ULI for reasons more than just aesthetics. It's important to the quality of our life. It's important that we have these active alleyways. And our building, where we live, our front door's on an alley. So you're not going to ever get my agreement that alleys are not really worthy of being studied in an environmental document as suggested by the applicant. Let me see, a couple of comments about the MND. There's a statement I pointed out that the existing environmental conditions were not adequately studied in the environmental document. What does the applicant say in response? Well, the existing conditions were adequately studied because they can be viewed in the pictures that accompanied the mitigated negative declaration. Well, I'm sure that statement is really, it's not only disrespectful but laughable. That will not meet legal standards in any court. And the final minute, I'd certainly like to yield to my spouse.
Good afternoon, council members. As my husband said, our front door is actually on an alleyway. The ULI study, it has some really good points about the South Park area, and it would be great if the city would pay attention to it, read it, and integrate most of these ideas that are in this report, because it would really help our community. We need more green areas. The report says our demographics are changing rapidly, and it's true. Now we have more kids in our area, we have plenty of dogs, and we need safety for the residents in our area. So the green areas or green alleyways, it's a great idea to provide some green areas to the community that is growing fast. Also, the way our property was developed, of course, we all know it was not well designed, but the city approved it, and I would really like the city to protect the current residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. We have Jim Reese. Are you representing the applicant?
Yes, I'm here representing the applicant.
We have two speakers after that. Jim Reese.
Okay. For the record, Jim Reese with the land use consulting firm, Craig Lawson and Company, here representing the applicant in their endeavor to develop the surface parking lot with a high-rise development project. I want to just reiterate what we heard before. I want to spend a lot of time on it, which is we have provided to you at the dais a document that talks about the community outreach we've done on the project, what we heard from those people during those 8 meetings, 3 of them specifically with Flower Street Lofts folks. We've made design concessions, which are extensive based on all of my experience in downtown Los Angeles. We've made more changes to a project here than in any other project. So we have that before you. I'm available to answer any questions you might have about that. We also provided a very detailed response to their appeal this time around to CPC. The 2008 environmental document was very detailed, as well as the addendum we did for this project. We believe that the addendum is adequately addresses CEQA and sufficiently mitigates any potential impacts we have on the project. Again, I'm here to answer any specific questions you have about that, but due to time, I'm not going to go into 106 pages of responses. Related to some of the comments that we heard today, you know, I too believe that the code says that we only have the zone variance in front of us for the bike parking, and as you raised earlier, this just means that if this got denied, we'd have to rearrange where the bike parking went in the site. It would be challenging, but there's a potential to do that. The expanded MND is adequate. And then some of the other items here, they talk about a ULI study. ULI study is not city code. And where some of those things might come down, might progress to codes in the future, they're not. It's not the code today. Really, I could go into a little more detail if you have specific questions, but right now I think I'd like to stand down and listen for any questions.
Thank you. Pat Barrett, Amanda Irvine.
Hi, I'm Pat Barrett. Hi, and I live at Evo, and I came down to speak regarding this issue, and the reason being is that I believe everything that they're asking for should be granted, especially for the parking, because I walk around downtown LA a lot, and I don't see any hindrances with the parking or anything, people coming in and out. The only thing is that I see is, and that I see is really good, that they put the parking, that they cover it, that it is parking. The other thing is bicycles. I think they should get their permission to put the bicycles the way they want. We're at Evo, at least on the penthouse parking, and where I am, we have places to put bicycles, and I don't want to delay anybody for construction. The other thing that I would like you to see in putting things moving forward is that the HOAs that are going in, and I know, Huizar, that you're an advocate of this, is maybe putting testing for the board of HOAs. That's number one. Number two is I think the management companies need to be tested. And another thing that I think that you also need to do, can I speak up?
Yeah,
is
finish your
that
sentence or your
because
thought.
we need, and these people putting in this this new building needs to have, like restaurants, some type of regulation. We have no regulation at all. Talking to other homeowners in my building and other buildings, that maybe you should be able to put like restaurants on the outside. How are they graded by the city? Is A, B, C, or D? Okay. For example, our pool area around it is dirty, and we've been trying to get that fixed for 3 years.
Okay.
So it would be appreciated, and thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Irvine, and I'm the Director of Planning and Communications for the South Park Business Improvement District, in which this project is. I wanted to let you know that our board does not take formal positions on development projects, but I wanted to inform you that the developer did present to the board at a public meeting on August 21st and answered any questions and comments that the community had, and that the board did feel that the project and developer had done adequate and fair community outreach on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let me ask the planning staff one question. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the bicycle parking request for a variance. So the variance has been requested, and you're in your response, you mentioned that, well, you support that because otherwise, if we require them to follow what are the rules, that it will be problematic for some of the floor area businesses, etc. Now, in doing that, does that in any way hinder what would be required of any other building in terms of providing for bicycle parking, etc.? Where would that go if they're asking for a variance? We're just not going to require it at all, or where would that go?
You mean if the variance was denied, where would they then be required to locate?
Yes.
They'd probably have to located on the ground, at grade.
And you were suggesting
they would
lose. So where would it go now with the variance?
If you were to take a look at the floor plans.
So they're asking for a variance not to do it.
With the variance, it stays in the garage still.
It stays in there.
There's 3 levels of subterranean parking and 3 levels of above grade parking.
Okay.
So it'll be dispersed throughout all those levels,
so
and it'll be very close. It'll be as close as feasible to the elevator to minimize the path of travel.
But it's still be there. We're not minimizing
they're not asking for a reduction. Yeah, they'll still provide all of the required spaces.
Okay, thank you. So I agree with a lot with what the appellants mentioned, and I did read that ULI report. I did support a lot of what's there. Some of the issues they raised in their application, their appeal, I agree with. However, what's before us today, and as mentioned by the planning staff, is the variance for the bicycle parking and also the M&D that does not touch upon some of the issues raised by the appeal. So although I would like to support the issues raised, what's before this committee today are two items that doesn't really touch upon those. Otherwise, we would have to deny the whole project, which I think in this instance it seems that they have worked with the community to come up with a project that has been modified to support some of the original concerns. And it would be very difficult at this time to do that without really sustaining from evidence provided by the planning department to do that. So I would ask that we deny the appeal and move this item forward. Is there a second for that? Second from Mr. Cedillo. And we will, when is this in council?
This won't be in council until the 25th.
Okay.
Because council is in recess on the 18th, 19th, and 21st.
Okay, let's do that. Great, thank you. So ordered. Next item, please.
Let's take public comment, Councilman, before we go into the last item, which is a closed session item.
Okay, there's no public comment? William Cruzman, I can't find your card, but if you want to come up and speak, please. And then we'll have a...
1 minute is never enough, but I'm going to do what I can. I attended the meeting here on October the 21st where you took items 1 through 7 on consent. Before you took them on consent, you added 3 more areas to the consent calendar: Larchmont, someplace else, and Old Granada Hills. Old Granada Hills never appeared on any agenda for Planning and Land Use Council regarding the RFA to be included in the interim control ordinance that was put to the board this morning. The problem is you significantly changed the motion when you added those 3 areas because the public was not afforded the opportunity to come and speak to those areas. You told me you did not take my public comments at that meeting because the issue had already been heard by committee, when in fact on October the 7th, when the item was heard, there was not a quorum of this committee, so therefore it was not heard by a full committee, and therefore my public comment should have been allowed on October 21st, and to not allow that is a violation of my Brown Act rights.
Thank you, sir. So with that, we will go into closed session to take up what item?
It's item 10, Councilman. It's a status update on the case entitled Lamar Central Outdoor LLC versus City of LA.
Okay, can we clear the chambers, please, and only have people who are... Are we back on? Thank you very much. We have just heard item number 10, a closed session discussion with the city attorney regarding Lamar digital billboard litigation, Lamar versus City of LA, and there was no action taken.
Correct.
And I believe that concludes this meeting. There are no pending items on the agenda. Good night. Go vote if you haven't already. And go Bears.